Okay.
This meeting is being recorded.
Okay. So, hi. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, everyone, wherever you are. A very warm welcome to all of you, joining us today. So, my name is Rupak, and I am one of the senior course advisor at Techcanvass. I will be the host for today's insightful session on the product manager's playbook, turning ideas into scalable products. So it's wonderful to see such a great participants from professionals across different domains who are looking to explore or advance their career in product management. So for those who are new to Tech Canvas, we are an IIB endorsed education provider offering globally recognized certification training programs and career oriented issue courses for business analysts, product managers, and other related IT professionals. Our mission is to bridge the skill gap between the traditional roles and modern IT or business functions through a practical and mentor-led training. So here at Tech Canvas, we offer a wide range of programs, including ECBS, ECBS, EVAP, which is IIBA BA certifications, and also different domain-based BA programs in banking, finance, capital market, US healthcares, and others. And also we have agile analysis courses and product management and product owner courses as well. So, uh, what truly sets Techcanvass apart is our industry driven approach. Our trainers are working professionals and certified experts, bringing real life project experience into the classroom. So, we also combine conceptual learning with practical exposure through case studies, assignments, and live projects, helping learners apply their knowledge to real time business scenarios. Our community of 25,000 plus learners and a strong alumni network across the globe stands as a testimony to the quality and impact of our programs. So, today's session in Product Manager's Playbook, turning ideas into scalable products, has been designed to get an in depth, actionable guide to entire product development lifecycle from initial ideation to successful launch and sustained growth. So we are delighted to have Mr. Sumit Mukherjee, our speaker for today. Sumit is a product manager currently working with Turing, and he brings with him over 13 years of rich experience in product management and business analysis. So he has deep experience in building 0 to 1 products, including MVP launches, as well as managing mature platform products. And he is CSPO, CBAP, and SAFE POPM certified as well. So without further any delay, let's get started. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Sumit Mukherjee to take us through today's session. So over to you, Sumit.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Rupak. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, Sumit, you are. You are.
Great,
And
great.
before you start, Sumit, I would request all of you, if you can please, for a moment, if you can please switch on your cameras so that we can at least see who are with us today.
Hey, everyone. Hi.
Yes, yes, I can see Michelle Raj Kumar. Okay. All right. So yes, Sumit, over to you. Please, we can.
Sure. Yeah. So, first of all, thanks for the introduction, Rupak. That was very kind of you. And good evening, good morning, wherever you are. And as Rupak said, today we'll be talking about how ideas can be scaled into successful and optimized products. A brief introduction about me. So Rupak talked about most of it. So I have around 12 to 13 years of work experience in product management. I've worked in different sizes and scales of product from 0 to 1 product to large multinational corporations as well. Currently, I'm working for Turing as a product manager for PepsiCo, which is the world's second largest food and beverage industry, running some of the loyalty and AI related fraud check platforms. So I'll just quickly share my screen and just let me know if you can see it. I hope it's visible. Is it good?
Yes, it's visible now.
Great, great. Yeah. So, like you said, like we discussed, we'll be talking about how ideas can be turned into scalable products. So in our day to day, we use lots of products, right? I mean, we've seen products which we weren't using, let's say, a few years back, but due to the digital revolution, different channels opening and different needs, food delivery apps, taxi booking apps, apps or products or softwares we use in our day to day, even work life, like messaging, like Slack, for general productivity, spreadsheet tools. So all of these products didn't
I
exist
mean,
in our
we've
life, right? So
seen
they
products
generally
which
obviously
we
started
weren't
somewhere
using,
in
let's say, a
some
few
place
years.
through an idea or maybe some need, and eventually scaled up into probably just a small product and into global,
We use in our
products which
day to
are
day even work
popular
life,
worldwide.
like
So we'll be
messaging,
going
like
through the
Slack,
different stages into which
for
into how such products can be scaled. So we'll be talking about how a general idea or a problem can spark an idea, how innovators can sort of latch onto different problems faced by different customer segments and generate an idea. And based on those ideas and needs and wants, define a vision or a core value proposition into how products can meet those needs. We'll also see how products or product managers can validate those assumptions that okay, there are certain ways in which we can meet customer needs, so that they don't spend money too much into building things before they actually validated that this is a problem worth solving. And also looking at, once you validated problems, how to iterate and launch, how to optimize your products, making sure that you are solving the right problems. And also look at some day-to-day challenges that happens in product development, which as a product manager you would face and have to go through it to ensure that what you're shipping is actually useful to your customers. And it's not just about launching, right? Like we generally term product management as just solving users needs, but when you're thinking of a 0 to 1 and a scalable product, you also have to think out monetizing and making sure that that product is scalable to a wider audience, not just to your initial subset, right? So we'll look at how and what are the things that products need to think about. And also we'll have some certain time for question and answers, just to answer some of your questions. Yeah. So please keep your questions to the last, and we can answer them there. Okay. So starting with, how do we get there, right? If you think of building scalable products as your summit, as your end goal, we need to start somewhere, right? So think of it like sort of a base camp. So it always starts with trying to understand what you're trying to solve, what are you trying to deliver, what pain are you trying to mitigate. So it always starts with some sort of problem, some sort of discovery that you're trying to drive. And based on the problems and the problem needs that you see, you eventually come with a vision or some sort of idea into terms of how these products can solve customer pain points. And also you look at in terms of, okay, once you have these visions, how do you validate that this is something that a customer is getting value of, is getting paying, is willing to pay for. And once you obviously have this basic understanding, this validation that okay, I've built something or I have some idea which customer is getting value of, how do you build and iterate on it, making sure that you make it ready to launch, where you are ready to release it to a wider cycle. And then like we talked about, right, like eventually the last stage, the summit, is making sure it's not just about launching, it's about post launch, how do you optimize, monetize, and also create that flywheel, that sort of self-fulfilling cycle of okay, customers are coming in, they're getting a good value, they're spreading word of mouth, more users are coming in. So that flywheel, how does that get built, is eventually a end goal, right? So it always starts with a problem or a need that you eventually are trying to solve. So let's start with understanding what a problem is. So in product management, there's essentially two concepts that we call it as problem space, and then there's a solution space. So problem space is essentially a place where users, your customers exist, their needs and wants and desires and problems exist. And solutions is basically your product, the different kinds of ways in which you're addressing those needs, right? So one thing, the first thing that you learn is you never mix them, right? So it's not about having an idea and then trying to see whether customers are willing to buy this or willing to pay for this, or whether this is work in the customer. It's always starts with, okay, let's start with problem first. Let's try and understand what are your customers, what do they do, and then figuring out in the solution space, what are the different ways in which you can meet them. It can be through software, it can be through process, it can be through another way. It doesn't have to be always working software. So that is why it's important to understand that in the problem space, there exist problems which won't, and needs which are static. And in the solution space, there are different products, needs, services existing which meet those needs to certain extent. Maybe they might be very fulfilled very nicely, or there might be certain gaps which you as a product manager needs to explore and understand, okay, how does these two solution spaces and the problem space fit together. Yeah. So like we talked about, right, it always starts with understanding the user's pain. It doesn't start with some sort of brilliant idea. Even if you start with an idea, it always is based on certain assumptions or something that you've observed a user or customer go through, right? It doesn't come right from air. So it's about understanding, okay, what our user pain is. And once you get that deep understanding, is only when when you're confident that okay, you can actually drive solutions which can help meet those needs. And then once you get those better understanding through iteration and various different cycles, you can eventually build a viable solution. So always as a product manager, when you're building a new product, especially for 0 to 1 products, it always has to start with what are you trying to solve, right? So because as a 0 to 1 product, you don't have unlimited funds. You have obviously limited budgets, so you can't just keep throwing ideas to the wall. You need to have some sort of basis into which you want to build your solution for. So let's start with understanding the problem, right? Like, how do you, as a product manager or as an entrepreneur or as a founder, figure out the different kinds of problems, right? So obviously there is some sort of market sizing. There are different kinds of markets. We know that there are B2B products, there are B2C products. So figuring out a niche is the first part of it. But once you figure out that niche, right, like, okay, this is the specific geography, or this is the specific demographic, or this is the specific type of firms or the different industries that you want to target, you go about trying to understand through observation as to what are the users doing there, what is their daily lives like, and what are the pain points they're facing. So we have this term called as contextual inquiry. Contextual inquiries is basically understanding or observing how users are actually performing their duties, or meeting their needs, and then interviewing them, that okay, this is how we observed you doing certain things, what are the pain points you faced, what are some things that you feel can help you. And then there's conversations, which is obviously a follow-up to contextual inquiry. You need to have conversations into the users, not only in relation to how their needs are, but their overall psyche, in terms of when they're trying to solve a particular need or problem, what are they actually trying to do? Is it that they're trying to book a cab, or is it they're trying to go to a certain place? Is it that they're trying to drill a hole, or is it that they want to actual hammer? So you need to figure out what the actual end goal is, not just what they are asking for. And then there's data. So depending on the market, depending on the industry, there's obviously data, third party data, or data that you can collect through surveys, conversations, which gives you certain insights and patterns and common themes into which into areas where you think users might be facing certain issues, right? So understanding those patterns, those behaviors, will unlock new insights, and based on those insights you can eventually design solutions which can meet those needs. And the base of this is empathy. So this is really important as a product manager, because putting yourself in the shoes of the users, only then can you ask the right questions. Just being a distant third person observer doesn't make you ask those questions. So it's about understanding what their pain points are, what their needs are, what are their aspirations, and then figuring out, okay, based on these different traits, how are they approaching the job, or how are they approaching the needs that they're trying to satisfy. So the user empathy is the most important thing, and using that lens, you need to ask the right questions, you need to analyze the right data, and the observation needs to be in that lens. So that's the most important, I would say, skill in when you're understanding the problem. So one of the key things that now that you have sort of interviewed your users, you sort of profiled multiple types of users or customers, you need to sort of document them and sort of have a sort of framework to eventually gain an understanding into terms of what is the ecosystem that your users come in. So one popular technique is empathy map. So empathy map consists of basically looking at, again, from the lens of a user, putting yourself into the shoes. What are they hearing, what are they seeing, what are they thinking and feeling, and what are they saying? And based on their eventual sort of different jobs and needs they want, they have certain pains in performing their jobs or in meeting their needs, and certain gains that they're looking for when they want a particular job or need, right? So as an example, let's say we take a small business owner who's just starting out with a small business, could be any kind of business, right? So when we say what are they thinking and feeling, so obviously as a new business, they're worrying about the cash flows, they are worried about how do they grow their customer bases, they're also looking at, there are bigger players in the market, so how do they stand out, how do they compete with certain players. And when you talk about C, what are the different challenges that they're seeing in the market space, what are the things that they're trying to seek, like having good staff, having a reliable workforce, attracting new customers. This is what they're trying to achieve, right? And say and do is essentially how they actually manifest those what they're seeing and what they're feeling into words or into their actions. So when you interview them, they'll probably talk about they want to improve customer satisfaction, because that obviously improves the amount of purchases or whatever. Scaling your operations, they obviously want to grow their business. Managing resources efficiently, obviously employees and obviously labor is a big part of expenses, so managing resources efficiently is important. And actively engaging in community events is something that, okay, you can be participating of the community so that word of mouth increases. And when you say hearing, like what are they hearing? So it can be feedback from customers, advice from mentors, networking events. So essentially all of this thinking, seeing, feel and do translates into certain pains and gains. So as a small business owner, for example, their pains can be that they're struggling with limited funding. There are high operational costs, struggles to maintain work-life balance personally. And what they're trying to achieve is to get financial stability, a loyal customer base, and business growth. So this is one example of where you can see that, okay, there are certain wants or certain pains which you see, and as a product manager you might build a product around this so that they can achieve. So if you have the data, if you interviewed enough customer, you might come up with some sort of hypothesis, or you might come some sort of vision or a clarity that, okay, maybe I've interviewed so many people, I think that building such kind of solution can help meet their needs. So again, this is one way to sort of frame the profiles of the customers that you observe, interview. There are other ways also. There are journey maps which you can use. There are JTBDs, which is really job to be done frameworks you can use. But just know that it's important to profile your customers, because as a 0 to 1 product, like you mentioned, there's not infinite amount. You need to really hone in into the customer base that you want to target. And just having a rough idea of it doesn't help, because eventually you're going to build a solution, and if you build it to too wide an audience, then it's going to probably not meet too many needs. It's going to be just surface level solutions. And at the same time, if you're building for a too narrow an audience, maybe you can't scale it further. So you need to find an audience, customer base which is sizable, which can expand, which is growing, as well as something where you feel there are lots of pains which you can address through your solutions. So one way to again sort of have or jot down or structure your different the observations which you see, and the one way which you can address it is called as product vision template. So this is basically based on all your observations, your empathy maps, and your job to be done. You might come up with some sort of hypothesis that, okay, if we build some sort of product which does X, Y, and Z, we might meet those needs. So a product vision template is in a way trying to address that. So basically a product vision template has certain criteria that you sort of need to fill. And the reason why we need to have product vision template is A, for investors, because investors would obviously want to know exactly what your niche is, rather than just having a bunch of wants and needs which can be too broad. And A or B also is to align your team. So the teams that will be working internally, your initial team members, to align strategically that, okay, this is our niche, this is what we're trying to address, and we'll see further how they go about that. So for example, one template can be like for, which is your target customer, who is your statement of opportunity. The is the product name that you're building, is a product category, is a product in what product, is it a B2B product, is a B2C product, what industry is in. That is basically the key benefit. So you can say, as for a small business owner, you're building a small, let's say, invoicing app which is free to use. So basically that's in the B2B space, and that benefits them in terms of not adding to their costs. So unlike other invoicing softwares out there, which is more, which you have to pay. And our product, the primary differentiation, that we won't follow a revenue model. We will sort of do an ad based kind of business, or we'll run AdSense kind of ads. So those are the different ways where you sort of, this is one way you can structure your different your product vision template. And what this gives you is obviously one sort of area that you need to focus on. Yeah? So how does product vision eventually fit into your overall goal or your eventual product development process, right? So it obviously starts with the product vision. You know your customers well enough. You've done all those techniques. You've jotted down your vision. So now your product vision is your North Star. It ideally shouldn't change across years or even multiple years, because that is your niche. and it informs everything downstream, right from what your strategy is. So we're not talking about solutions yet, we're still in the problem space, we're still trying to understand what the users want. So when you talk about product strategy, what are the different ways and what are the things you think you can do to solve those needs? And once you have that strategy, how do we ensure that there's early value or there are quick wins where you can sort of make sure that there are customers willing to engage with your product? And once you have those quick wins, when you've established some sort of value proposition, you start with your core development and optimization phase, where we'll see later like how do you optimize that, right? Yeah. So another important framework that users use is value proposition canvas. Now this is really important because again it helps align teams and different stakeholders within your organization that okay, this is what we're actually building, nothing beyond this. And B, it also actually gives you statements or hypotheses which you need to test, because as a 0 to 1 product, as a startup, you won't have infinite amount of needs. You need to make sure that as fast as possible you are ensuring that what you're building is eventually going to meet your needs. So value proposition canvas has two parts. That to the right there is the customer segment. So like we saw, we saw empathy map where the user had pains, gains, and customer jobs. Customer jobs can also be termed as, let's say, needs or activities to be performed. So in a B2B space it would obviously be their roles, and in a B2C space it would probably be their day-to-day activities that they do. And to the left you have your value proposition. So now that you have your customer segment, you have seen certain pains and gains. What are you think the things or solutions you can offer that could meet them? So value proposition has a mixture of gain creators which directly addresses the gains. So in the example of the business owner, we saw that their aspiration was to reduce cost to get more revenue. So gain creators are what are the solutions that, or what are the things that you're going to deliver in your solution, in your products, that is going to meet those gains. Pains is again like the pains we saw, like as a small business owner, inventory costs might be high, attritions might be high. So what are the things in your solutions that can help relieve those pains? And last is about your product and services, which addresses your job. So there are core jobs that obviously, or core activities that your users want to perform. What are the actual products and services you're going to offer, the functional things that you're going to offer which meets those needs? So these two together gives you your value proposition canvas, and this again addresses or informs your roadmaps. It informs your MVPs that you're going to build to test that whether what you're framed here is actually true or not. Because if this is true, this means that you're going to build a product that is going to be going to be engaging for the users, going to deliver value, which means they're going to stick around, they're going to advocate it around within their community, it's going to stick more, retention is going to be high. So then you need to invest on it, then build it, and then scale it, right? But that's a lot of investments, that's a lot of time lost. You can't directly go into building phase, you're still in the problems phase trying to validate whether your value proposition is right or not. So that is where MVP comes in. You've probably heard of this minimum viable product. So there are obviously there's a lot of literature around it. What I want to focus on is when you're designing your MVP, right? What you're actually doing is you're not building a product that is going to meet those needs for completely, right? You're also not going to build a product that is going to be half baked or low quality kind of product. It's going to be something that actually validates what your core value proposition is, or what your learning is, or what your hypothesis is. Because the core value proposition is in a way is a hypothesis statement. You have certain pain relievers or some gain creators, those are nothing but hypotheses that you feel that this will solve certain pains or gains. So the most important thing is when you're designing MVP, understand what your core CVP is, or a core value proposition is. What is a riskiest assumption? Because if these assumptions are not true, if your entire model fails, it might mean your product fails, your funding fails, and it might mean your entire business collapses, right? So to give an example, let's say you're looking at marketplaces, right? So in marketplaces you have obviously a creator or a buyer ecosystem, sorry, a creator or a seller ecosystem, and then you have a buyer ecosystem, or a consumer ecosystem, right? So for example, youtube is a good example where you have creators, content creators, and you have consumers. So we know youtube is a business model that works. We know there are sort of needs of users, that they want to watch content on their mobile phones, on their devices, right? So we know that, okay, if we build a solution that allows users to upload videos and consumers to view it, it is hypothetically a good one. But we know there are basically no competitors to YouTube to do that. So one of the reasons is because it could be one of the assumptions that when we are building a YouTube competitor is that users are willing to upload their videos, or content creators are willing to upload their videos. So we need to think of this assumption, because if this assumption proves false, that means you'll build everything, you'll launch the product, but nobody will use it, nobody will upload content. And if you don't have a creator economy or a creator ecosystem, there won't be a consumer ecosystem. So entire product collapses. So when you're designing the MVP, it's important that you're also testing your assumptions. It's not just about testing your CVP, that okay, these are the features I think users will want, the most important features. Is also testing assumptions, and this is really important for two-faced or two-sided ecosystem kind of products. And the last one step is, what is the smallest experiment? You are building a 0 to 1 product, you don't have unlimited funds, you need to ensure that what you're building is right, or you also need to be ready to pivot. So the what is the quickest way to do that, right? We have multiple examples or multiple MVPs. You'll find this on the internet, for example. And one of the most important thing is that it doesn't have to be working software also. So in the case of Airbnb, or even there was this Zappbox, which was a website where you could buy shoes, and eventually got acquired by Amazon. What they started, or what they did in the MVP, is not building a website where people could order shoes. They actually went around their community in their locality, asked people or took orders physically from them and bought them shoes, or basically showed them photos from existing shoe shops, and to them, where okay, these are the shoes, are you willing to buy this? So it doesn't have to be working software, right? There are other examples also where you can like Dropbox is another example, where their first MVP, and that's probably the most famous example, is the creator just uploaded a video on YouTube. You can even search today on YouTube the MVP, where the creator just uploaded the video, that okay, this is what we're going to do, we are going to do file management in this way, and that became viral, right? It wasn't a working software. So that's the most important thing, is it's a vehicle to validate what your assumptions are, whether true or not. It doesn't have to be working software, right? It's a output, to the output of an MVP is to validate your learning. And like you see in the slide over here, it is not a minimal product with all basic features. So because if you are not building features that meet your needs, or are too low quality, then users might not engage with it. So you're not actually getting actually good learning out of it. It shouldn't be a low quality product, like there shouldn't be bad UX or bad interactions, too slow, too hard to use, too hard to understand, because that is also issue for the users. It doesn't have to be breaking bugs, because again, that is a friction point, because if you have too many bugs, users won't use your MVP and you won't get the learning that you want. Buying decision is not achieved yet, so it's not necessary that the users are willing to pay at this stage. Even if your MVP is successful, you've seen good engagement, you've seen good, maybe word of mouth, it could be that the price elasticity is low within your customer base, right? For example, if you look at India as a market, right, we have this concept of there was this concept before, where you had to sort of pay for phone calls, to make a phone call, or even to receive a phone calls, right? But you still have, people had to use that because they wanted to call, and that was a basic need. But that doesn't mean that users are willing to pay for it. So ensure that MVP, you also need to validate, maybe not at the MVP stage, eventually, that whether users are going to pay for this. Because if users are not going to pay for it, if the price elasticity is low, then you to probably figure out your revenue model, or maybe scale accordingly, to ensure that you don't build something and then you find out that users are not paying for it. And like the last point which I mentioned, like for Dropbox, Zappbox, there are multiple examples. Even Airbnb, I think so, they started out where they just listed properties on some normal classy fields website. They didn't have an actual Airbnb. So this is basically, how do you understand your hypothesis, whether it's true or not. And if your MVP is not true, you either need to pivot or come up with new set of assumptions or new set of ideas, right? Okay. So now we come to the build, measure, learn loop. So now that you've shipped an MVP, you've got a lot of validated learning, you've probably gone back to your CVP, tweaked it a little, you've done multiple iterations of your MVP, and now you're confident that, okay, what we've built is now probably sticky enough, it's being used enough. At least the core features that we're building is important. So that is when you can scale and start building on them, right? One point which I also wanted to talk in MVP is that obviously you don't build the entire suite of features and all your pain relievers and your gain creators. You probably prioritize one or two, ideally which differentiate from your competition, because we see AI products today, right? You have search. There are countless such of search engines, but then there are search engines which have AI built into them. You have AI in multiple products. So maybe try and build or build your MVP in a way that has these sort of differentiators from audience, to ensure that, okay, whether this is some feature or some sort of solution which the user is actually engaging with. So when you come to the build measure loop, so this is actually part of, not only when this actually comes before the MVP and part of your entire development process. It's an iterative cycle. You have to ensure as a 0 to 1 product that you're learning as quick as possible, because your runway is limited, you don't have unlimited funds. So if you're building and going too much into development and you're building the wrong thing, that is basically capital lost, right? So the shorter your feedback cycles, the more efficient your learning is, the quicker your validations are happening, and the better your product decisions are, right? And then the more frequent your product decisions are. So build, learn, measure, learn is basically you're building a small testable thing. To take an MVP an example, right? Your MVP is a small testable thing which basically you can test your hypothesis. You measure, so there are certain metrics which you feel that, okay, basically based on this we feel that 40% users will go and perform this step, or 60% we won't drop off from this particular page or this particular feature. So based on it, you measure, you see what user behaviors are, and then you learn from them. Once you learn, you have certain assumptions which are true, you have certain assumptions which are false, and you tweak them, and that fuels into your next build, measure, learn cycle. So that is why this is important. So you get quick validated learning, and it needs to be throughout your product development cycle, not only at the MVP stage, but also when you're actually building features and software to your customers. So yeah, I mean, also I think so. Yeah, one important thing is, like, when you're measuring in the MVP, you need to measure the increments. So each version, when you're releasing new versions, you need to ensure that, okay, whether these increments are increasing, reducing, whether they're static or not. Because if it's static, even that means probably this is a change which is not helping customers, and you need to pivot, or you need to go back to your customers or your MVP customers and figure out what is wrong with it, right? So that's an important thing. Okay. So there's this concept of product market fit, which you might have heard. So the thing is, we talked about building some sort of MVP, and eventually the goal is, summit is to build a product that is successful, people will use, people will pay for. But how do you know when is the eureka moment that that, okay, products are sticky enough, there's organic growth. So obviously very early in the stage, when you're just in the idea phase, you just have certain hypotheses. Most probably your hypothesis will be wrong, because haven't actually validated them. It's just sort of guesswork, maybe informed guess, but still it's not 100%. You still need to optimize it, right? So generally, an organization will have two parallel tracks when they're trying to build and scale the products. You have external releases, we talked about MVP, and internal releases where you're internally testing out, maybe first, as a 0 to 1 product, just the founders, then the product team, then you roll it out to the QA team, then maybe to the marketing team or the other team members. So there are two tracks, right, where you internally scale a product, and then there's obviously an externally where you scale a product, right? So at the MVP first stage, you're just testing out hypothesis. Most probably you need to optimize more. So you go through those optimizations. Eventually you see people using your products more, and then you come up with, okay, now you're probably satisfied that, okay, this feature set is something that users will use, but you still don't want to roll it out to the entire audience, right? Because that might create a negative impression. So you might we have some outreach programs to certain set of users or customers, telling them, hey, we have this certain sort of software which might solve these problems. it's in alpha stage and we want to just release it and to get your feedback, right? So what this does is it's mitigating your risk by not exposing your entire user base to potential problems all at once, right? So generally there's an alpha release, then there's a beta release, and then GA or a general audience release, which coincides with your go-to-market strategies, right? So this is the external track. In the internal track, you're dog fooding a solution. You probably have a closed beta, which is internal, as well as very specific users or co-users where you've signed an NDA, probably that okay, you're not supposed to talk about this product. It's probably in stealth mode, as we say in 0 to 1 products. So that can be that space. Eventually, once you go to beta phase and the higher phases, you see more engagement. You eventually figure out and you're confident that okay, this is something that we can actually release to all the public, and we can scale this, and this is something which users are getting actual value out of. So that is called product market fit. So it's an iterative process. Initially you won't get product market fit, but eventually you will reach that point to where users are getting enough value. They are not frustrated by a product. Enough of their needs are met, and now they're coming back. They're not just logging in and then forgetting about your product. They're coming back day to day or within a week. They're telling their friends, they're telling their community, and also that you getting good reviews on different sites, be it platforms or G2A for your B2B product. So that is when you know that your product is getting viral or it's getting popular, and when you know that you've achieved product market fit. And it's important to show product market fit in metrics, that okay, so many percentages, this is your 7-day retention, this is your sign up rate, this is your activation rate, and different kinds of metrics, because you need to secure funding with your investors as well. So showing PMF is an important milestone, and also it validates that okay, what you're going to build is eventually going to be useful for users, and you can actually build on that. Versus without PMF, there's a big risk that you're building something which is not actually useful for the users. Okay. So we talked about achieving PMF. So we started from MVP. We had multiple iteration cycles. We are somewhere sure, maybe in the alpha beta stage, we've identified that okay, we have some version of our product. It's not the final product, but we know that this is important for the users, and this is something which they're willing to pay. Now what comes is basically you need to have certain product development process in your organizations. You probably have a set of engineers, but you don't have them working on a cadence. You don't have teams aligned properly. So you need to work on those so that you are utilizing first their expertise to the fullest, and you have a regular cadence of tweaks, optimizations. We talked about the build, measure, learn loop, so that your increments that are informed from the previous cycle of learning is getting into the market. So there are multiple frameworks where teams operate. My personal experience is Scrum is a good way where you can start with building a small team. You can start with 1 week, 2 week, 3 week, 4 week sprints, and then eventually having one team, multiple teams, or cross-functional teams working on specific set of features. So Scrum, I think so most of you are aware of, it consists of a product backlog. So in the product backlog, you have a prioritized list of features. In the MVP stage, it might just be certain assumptions as well, that okay, you assume that if you release a new payment processor or a new payment option, that 50% of users will click on this button and use this method. But you actually don't want to invest in integrating a new payment processor, because it's going to take a lot of amount. So what you do is you maybe have an assumption, you have a sort of a blind door test, you just have a button for it, or you build a small version of it, and then see whether actually it's validating your hypothesis or not. Sprint planning meeting is obviously because based on your broad backlog, once you take it into a certain phase or iteration of delivery, that's basically called a sprint in Scrum. So you need to have some sort of sprint planning meeting that okay, these are the priorities list of features, assumptions, bugs that we want to test in this particular sprint, and you obviously have a team which is going to deliver on that. Scrum master is a role which obviously ensures that all these ceremonies and cadences is taking place. Once you've defined where you've had a sprint planning meeting, you have a sprint backlog, which is obviously a prioritized list of things that you're going to work in the sprint. Again, it can be 1, 2, 3, 4 sprint weeks. The important thing in the 0 to 1 when you're establishing a product development process is not what how long your sprint is, whether it's 1 or 2 weeks. What is important is that you have this regular cadence, this feedback loop, because once the output of your iteration is going to be your product increment, right? And when it goes to your alpha group or the beta group of users, you're going to get feedback. So that is the important part. The internals of it you can tweak, test, experiment on what works best for your organization. And even the 24-hour sort of daily release, even initially you won't have 24 hours daily build check-ins, because your team is just trying to figure out cadences and trying to figure out team dynamics. But eventually you'll see after team ships multiple features, they reach that cadence where they can sort of maybe do daily and quarterly, daily or check-ins once every 2 days. And important thing is also internally, as a sprint review, sprint retrospective, you get to internally sort of understand what are the things that are working in your product development process, isn't working, and then tweak accordingly. Okay, so quick checkpoint. We talked about the problem space, solution space. We talked about, okay, in the problem space, you're talking about problems, trying to understand needs. We had basically defining a product vision and a core value proposition based on what we've seen. We saw the empathy map initially just to structure our understanding of profiling of customers. We saw that, okay, one vehicle to ensure or to test your hypothesis in CVP is the MVP. And the MVP, you use your CVP, you use your riskiest assumptions, especially if there's money assumptions involved, and then obviously you try and figure out what's the easiest way to learn of it. Once you have an MVP out, you iterate on those MVP, get it to a stage where users are using it more and more and more. You have a product development pipeline, sort of process in place where you can have cadences and the build, measure, learn loop in action, and then based on that you sort of go from there and build towards release, right? So obviously the solutions or problems faced are lot near to infinite. The wants are lots, but you only have a small team. You can't work on all solutions, all problems at once. So you need to have some sort of prioritization in place, right? Because again, you don't have infinite runway. You need to make sure that you're making the maximum impact with the time your developers are working on your product, right? So the way it works is, I mean, it doesn't matter what product prioritization framework you use. What is important is it works for your team, and second is it goes through these 3 stages, right? Yeah, these 4 stages. So the first is idea collection. Now this idea collection is based on your validated learning we talked about. So based on your build, measure, learn loop, once you measured, when you rolled it out, you measured it, you had some learning. So that learning feeds into your idea collection, that okay, this is something which we can do to improve it, or this is a totally new way which we can do it, or this is what customers are trying to do in this particular page, so let's add this or delete this, right? So that's your ideas. You have an idea backlog, and then that idea goes to an impact assessment, because there can be multiple ideas, but you need to, like I said, it should be important that what you're addressing, what you're building is addressing the user needs. So that's where you see the impact assessment. This is where you're essentially right prioritization framework comes into place. You need to plug it into over here, that okay, this is how I'm going to validate all of these ideas and things that we want to address, and see what is the outcome of this, what is the stacked ranking of the ideas that we want to resolve. Feasibility review, so your MVP might say that we want AI into this, or you want some new totally different feature which is not aligned to your capabilities or to your product vision. So feasibility review, right from whether it's aligned to your vision, whether what you want to do, plus whether you have the engineering capacity and that engineering know-how to solve that. If it isn't possible, then it's no point taking up in the sprint, right? So as a product manager, what I also advocate is, you might do prioritization, but always work with your engineering manager or engineering lead to make sure that what you are prioritizing is also in line in what the team is capable of. And it's better to weed out those ideas or put them lower in the backlog, because yeah, you don't want to waste engineering capacity. What you could do is reframe those ideas as POCs, just to experiment on new technologies, new kind of frameworks, or new ways of working, so that you get an understanding whether it's actually worth picking up that idea or not. And then final selection. So your prioritization framework should ideally give you a stacked rank or a scored list of all the different things that you can do, and they would have a relative score at least, which can help you in selecting the right idea. So this is how your prioritization frameworks can be. I have put one example, which is especially since our topic is about building products from scratch, but in more mature organizations, you will have things like rice, cano model. You must have heard of these. But what I've seen in working in 0 to 1 companies is you don't have unlimited funds to test each and every idea. What you have is you have certain ideas. You don't have actual data regarding feature usage, right? What you have is okay, just certain ideas, certain assumptions. So one way to do it is when you're building a 0 to 1 product, there are two things which you're doing, right? You're trying to deliver value, and you're also ensuring that when you're building this product, the business is getting care of. When I say business is taken care of, is you can scale this product, you can grow this product, you can monetize it, you can expand it to a bigger user base, right? Because, for example, let's say you somebody comes up with an idea of a typewriter, right? Okay, so typewriter, you might say, okay, it's valuable, people want to type, they want to print sheets, but it's not an expanding market. Nobody uses typewriters these days. So you also need to look at the business this. So your assumptions, so the one way to ensure that what you're building is both viable from a value standpoint and a business standpoint is to bifurcate your assumptions. So you have value. So LOFA is your leap of faith assumption. So leap of faith assumptions is basically your assumptions, which if they are true, they're going to really be valuable for a product. But if they are false, they're going to basically mean you need to pivot or need to think of something big, because these are the riskiest ones. If they don't turn out to be true, your entire product, maybe prioritization backlog, or even your entire product model itself might be at risk. So what are the key value things that you think will be valuable to the users, and the growth from the business standpoint? So to give an example in terms of growth, this is that I gave an example, so like people nowadays don't actually pay for making calls. It's part of the sort of plan as such. Another example is like Ola and Uber, right? You might probably have an idea of maybe tipping the drivers, right? That's going to be a business model. You say that no, okay, you don't want to take money from the users. You're going to just take it from the commissions from the drivers tips, for example. But then you come to a market like maybe India, where there's a price elasticity is low, so users or riders are actually not tipping their drivers. So what happens is, in that case, your business fails. So you need to have an assumption that okay, are users actually tipping, are riders actually tipping their drivers or not? So that's one growth leap of assumption. So you have your list of value and growth LFAs. What you next can do is sort of figure out that okay, what is the impact of each of these assumptions? Like, you have all of these different things. What is the impact versus effort? So when I say impact, is how much is it going to deliver value to our users, and when you talk about effort, is what is it going to cost us in terms of money, in terms of engineering time, in terms of marketing material, in terms of promotional costs. So obviously, we just saw earlier that you want to ideally start with quick wins. So the maximum value which is going to deliver with minimum amount of time is something which you can probably start with. So you categorize or bifurcate all of your growth and value leap of faith assumptions into this matrix. There are other frameworks, like I said, you can use Kano models, different Kano model. The problem with Kano models is you're not exact. It's more of, it's not really suited at MVP stage. It's probably suited when you have lots of ideas, because there in Cannon model you are not testing assumptions, right? You are just testing sort of actual features. So impact and effort is a good candidate, I think, where you can use your different ideas. Now that you have sort of run through all your different ideas through this grid, you ideally would have a stack rank of different assumptions or ideas or features that you think will help the business as well as the users. But you actually don't have features in place, right? You need to test them out. This is your assumptions, this is your ideas, this is what your validated learning is telling you, but still you're not 100% sure. So what you need to do is, you have your core MVP which you initially have. You're right now in the alpha beta stage, but now you need to run multiple MVPs. You need to run multiple assumption tests to make sure that different features or different solutions are going to work. So you have MVP1, MVP2, MVP3. Each MVP stands for one an assumption. So an assumption could be like, in a driving example, people are going to pay for tip the driver. So that can be one assumptions, and that is part of your MVP. In that MVP, there can be multiple features where you have a feature of seeing, what is the basically giving the ability to the rider to give a tip, to change the amount, to give a rating. Those kinds of different features you can think of, right? Same goes with another feature you might need to think of. So you have different MVPs, but again, you have limited time, you have limited resources, you are still in zero stage, you don't have lots of funds, you have a small team, so you need to break them down. Okay, what are we going to do in release 1, release 2, release 3? That is where this comes into place, where in the first release you will prioritize only the topmost assumptions of your MVP1, MVP2, MVP3. So in your tipping the driver example in the MVP1, you might not add the feature of giving a feedback and tipping the driver. You'll just have probably just tipping the driver, because that is not as important as actually to your business revenue, because you're going to earn on commissions. So you have say release 2, release 3. So these are just examples like feature assumptions, and certain MVPs or assumptions are not that critical, so you might not even want to test them out in your first release because you have limited bandwidth. You will probably park them for later in your second release or your third MVP release. You can have that. So this is one framework which I've shown. You can tweak and customize the framework based on your assumption. So like I said, you have a list of value and growth LFAs. You run it through the impact effort matrix, and then you break it down into different releases based on the score. Okay, so we touched upon development practices. What are some challenges that products face when you're developing products, right? So in 0 to 1 stage, you don't have a lot of clarity into users' insights. You don't have a lot of data to back your decision. It's still in assumption phase. So what happens is there's lots of change. So you need to be quickly to adapt not only your product, your roadmaps, your entire development processes quickly, because you might run into some big assumptions, which is your most primary leap of faith argument, and that might not be true. So you need to adapt to that. So that is one challenge that you need to be ready of. Competing priorities. You have lots of needs, you have lots of wants, but you're a 0 to 1 stage product. You don't have lots of bandwidth. So you have 10 different ideas or solutions which are competing. So how do you choose that? That's one of the issues, right? Where you need to sort of identify that this is something which you are going to do, this is something which you're going to drop. Feature factory. So if you are just building in silo, not having that build, measure, learn loop, talking to your customers, then you're going to be in a feature factory, or basically what we also call as a build trap, where you're just building features, but they're not actually driving change. They're not giving value to the users. You're just burning venture capital, wasting time, but not delivering value. Quality. So generally your teams as what happens is in 0 to 1 stage, since you have small teams, you don't have those cadences, those understandings, those engineering practices in place. So the quality of the product suffers, maybe the performance wise, or certain features are totally broken. So that is something which happens in 0 to 1 products. And bad UX. So UX is generally not that highly invested in early stage products, unless you have that venture capital or backing, right? So one thing is that, okay, you just are prioritizing on delivering the features, somehow the UX can come later. But it can be a purchasing decision for some of your alpha, beta, or even MVP stage, which might impact your eventual stickiness of your product. And the way you build it. So we talked about build, measure, learn, act, and the reason is that you need to be agile into it. Right? So when I say agile, it doesn't mean you have to be very fast, breaking things, learning from it. You need to have make informed decisions, informed bets from a validated learning, roll it out, measure it, and then based on that, you need to pivot. And like you said, you need to be ready to change directions as needed. Versus a waterfall approach where you have 3 months, 5 months, or 6 months of big projects or big roadmaps items, and then you pick it them up, wait 3 4 months, roll it out, because you won't have that capital, that runway to show or deliver value not only to your customers but show it to a PMF, show it to your investors. So that's why I haven't included yet a roadmap kind of thing, right? That was the MVP 1 to 1 2 3 release, but generally my observation is in 0 to 1 products the roadmaps keep on changing. So it's okay to have a 1 or 2 months roadmap, but beyond that it doesn't make sense. So yeah, so we are close to the summit. We have followed good practices. We have have a good cadence, we have ready to ship a product, we have done the alpha beta stage, now it's going to be available to general audience. So what are the some of the launch checklists you need to have, right? Because you need to make sure that this is going to go viral, this is reaching the maximum audience possible, because this is going to happen only once in your entire product development, product life cycle. You won't have a second launching your product, right? So you need to have proper support and documentation in place, a support team that ensures that your initial customers don't have a bad experience, a communication plan in terms of, okay, what is currently being built, what are the features that you have, what is the roadmap like, so that they're excited and they are, they want to come back to the product. Build flexibility, so allow room for adjustments in market conditions change. So you might have certain hypotheses, you might have very good validated learning, but still when you roll it out, you see that people don't like this, they want a new feature, they want something else. So you need to build your product in such a way which is flexible. You might have feature flags where you can turn off features, or you might have different versions of your product where you can roll back or switch, if needed. Metrics and monitoring, like you mentioned, that is all about, build, learn, measure, map. You need to have your validated learning, so that is where metrics come in. If you don't have metrics, you can't measure them, and you don't know whether to optimize, whether to stop, whether to pivot. Rollback plan, like we also discussed, that might on production day, or when you release it, it might totally break, or in the second version when you release it, or after a week it breaks. So you need to have some way to roll it back. So this is a common issue faced with really nascent products. And marketing and sales needs to be involved, because as you scale the product, marketing collateral also needs to be there, because they need to be informed well in advance that, okay, this is the first release, this is the second release, so that they can prepare the collateral, send out emails, communicate to the customers. So they need to also be in sync. It's not just about the engineering and the product team and the founder team delivering it. Okay, so now once you've actually launched, you have certain GTM strategies. Now you'll see different kinds of data coming in, right? Users are starting to use your product. So there are two types. One is qualitative data and quantitative data. When you talk about quantitative data, you see different kinds of metrics being moved. There's this RA, double A, triple R framework, R framework. So you have acquisition, which is your first A, which is, okay, number of people signing up, whether it's increasing, decreasing. Your marketing and sales will contribute to initial signups, but are users signing up again or not? Like, is there organic growth or not? Like, are people referring to other people and are they signing up? Or is it purely through marketing and sales where they're sort of running discounts or promotions? Second is activation. So percent experiencing your CVP. So we had a core value proposition or hypothesis. How many people are actually experiencing it, right? In the example of, let's say, a new payment gateway, or a new payment processing, maybe let's say you have a hypothesis that, okay, 70% of people will get activated or experience this value. Are you actually getting, are users actually using that or not, is part of your activation. Retention is how you often, or are your users coming back or not. You might have lots of users coming in through marketing and sales, but they don't stick around, right? That means you don't have a proper product enough or ready to be scaled. You need to still iterate further and to ensure that what you're building improves retention, so that you have a bigger customer base who's coming back, who's engaging more with your customers, who's advocating for your product within their communities, and then you have better revenue potential. Referral is obviously through stickiness. If your users get value out of your more, they will share this product, they will write reviews, they will make videos on it, they'll make podcasts on it, and then that will help your marketing. So referral is an important part, referral, to get your the revenue metrics in place. And last is revenue. So all of this is in place for revenue. You need to have measure what is the revenue coming in, what is your lifetime value. So that's generally expressed by average revenue per user, what is their monthly revenue per user. Those kinds of different metrics you need to measure and see whether they're going up, going down, why is it happening, optimize them. And then the qualitative data. So qualitative data is basically what are users saying about your product, on different channels or to you. So it can be through interviews, they are telling you what are they facing, what issues they're facing, what do they like about product. Support tickets, we have a support team, so there might be different support issues. What is that data telling you? Reviews, what are social media channels, G2A, App Store reviews telling about your product? Surveys, so you may launch surveys through marketing or through your product channels, just to understand what is the user sentiment. And replace, so you have softwares where you can integrate within your app itself, and you can sort of get a replay or a recording of what the users are doing, and then you can see where users are dropping off, where are they spending too much time, what are the friction points, and then optimize from there. So these are the two different areas. What eventually you are trying to get is insights out of them. Through quantitative and qualitative data, you want insights, validated learning, which you can then make hypotheses or ideas on, which you can test in your next MVP or in your next feature. Okay, so we scaled the product in a way that we've used metrics, but eventually it needs to be in a way that brings business to the user. So it's not about delivering value; it also is about delivering business value. So product value is something where you ensure that that happens, and how that happens is you're ensuring you're giving a better and better product to more and more users. So the first step is a great product experience. So basically, user experiencing have a great experience, a UX, a UI where they come back to. Happy, successful users is their needs and wants are met. This leads to more word of mouth or more organic growth, more advocacy, that and more virality. So more and more users are coming in. More users and data. That means you are getting more. You're understanding behaviors better. You know what the data is telling you. You get more quantitative data which you can analyze. Hypotheses are now more grounded and more data driven versus just just ideas. So better product decisions, because the decisions that you're making is based on data, and since you're making better decisions, you're delivering a better product. So this flywheel is a self-fulfilling way where the more and more you scale your product, you're delivering a better product. You get a flywheel which can be scaled, and you can monetize the users better. So as you scale users, there are certain dynamics product, a 0 to 1 product needs to get in or to understand or to ensure. So when you're scaling products, you need to ensure that the product experience also scales. So how is the interface design? What is the customer feedback? What is the optimizations that you're running on your UX is something. I haven't added description, sorry. But this is basically what you're trying to get from your products. The next is basically the scalability part of it. So what is the cloud infrastructure cost, like what is the expandability, what is the automation? Can you reduce or keep costs minimal when you are actually scaling the products? What's your sort of incremental cost that incurring in your new customer? What is your customer acquisition cost, for example? Market expansion, so new geographies, localization, strategic partnerships. What are the different geographies that you can launch, localization, new market segments, or even new strategic partnerships with different brands or different products? And the revenue growth, right? Now, since you have a flywheel, you have a scaled product, how can you monetize better? Like, there are different revenue models that, you can use subscription models, you can use pay-per-use model, you can use one-time models, and there are different models as well. But the idea is that since you have a returning group of users who are willing to engage with the customer, who are getting value, now they are willing to also pay for your product. So this is the different points that you need to scale along with your scale product. And lastly, we'll just go through some key takeaways. So this is essentially, starting from an idea, and when you're actually building a product which self-fulfills into, being scaled and gives you consistent revenue. So we talked about first is the problem first part of it, where you're approaching it from not only ideas, but you're actually thinking about what the problems is, what the users are facing. Value propositions based on your customer interviews, data, observations. You have some sort of value proposition or some sort of set of hypotheses that you think will help the users. Lean execution. Once you have those hypotheses, what is the quickest way you can execute and test those hypotheses? That comes through your build, measure, learn loop, where you break it down your ideas into small manageable assumptions or features, because building the actual features and then shipping it is too large, make too much time, but you can test the assumption that whether the users will actually use this or not. So that is all part of lean execution. Continuous learning, so again, the build, measure, learn, you need to ensure that the next cycle or delivery, the next phase of delivery is based on past data. So you need to have these feedback loops built in right from your MVP stage, in your build cycle, into your post launch support. Everything needs to be have their own feedback loops and big feedback loops, so that they eventually address each and every stage of your development process. And the flywheel thinking, so it's not product development management, like I said, it's not just about addressing needs. You also need to address or make sure that they're meeting business goals. And for a 0 to 1 product, there's no point in just meeting needs. You need to make sure that users are paying for it. And how does that happen is through a flywheel of continuous delivery of incremental value, where users are engaging more and more, and they're getting a better experience. So you're getting more growth and then you need to obviously think about how do you scale it from marketing perspective, new geographies, infrastructure costs, the product itself, those kind of strategic things you also need to think of. So this is essentially the entire thing I wanted to talk about. Yeah, any questions that you have that you want answered?
Hi, Sumit, Joel here. Very nice, informative session. Thank you for you.
Hello, is it me? We can't hear you, Joel, I think.
Hey, hi Sumit, this is Vinod.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah. So, Sumit, regarding this product management, can you please more light on how we can add the AI and how we
Mhm.
can implement it and how it will be beneficial if we will initially start to think on that?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a broad topic. So, like I said, right, ideally, like we talked in the first slide, I'll just go back. It's not about an idea. You start with the user problems, right? Like, what are you actually trying to solve through your idea of AI? That is what you need to start think about. So it depends on the product which you think. So products which, like, tools which you use, like search tools or coding tools or photo editing tools, these become good candidates of AI. But because the problems that users face using these tools or the needs that they want lends well, because it's about content creation, editing, creating new kinds of content, right? But let's say you want to have a physical kind of product, right? And a toothbrush, for example, or razing blade, such physical products, generally there's no scope of AI, right? Your needs are not aligned with AI. So you need to think of problems first. Where there is an alignment, yes, obviously then you come up with, okay, well, what is the solutions, what are the capabilities that can offer, how does it meet and address your needs, right? If there is there alignment, if there is enough alignment, then it is worth pursuing. And again, you have assumptions, right? So you have assumptions that, let's say, having a kind of a chatbot built into your software will help users. So instead of integrating and building a chatbot integrating to LLM models, what you can do is sort of having first a real time customer support talking to a customer, right? Where they have a window, they can type in questions or they can type in this, and then the actual person addresses it. I gave the example of Zappos or even Airbnb. They had this. So these are concierge kind of things where instead of building the actual product, you first have some sort of concierge services where you see whether it can be addressed person manually or not. And if you're seeing that, yeah, many users are actually interested in this chatbot thing, then you can think of, okay, this chatbot can be better automated by more accurate answers more faster if you integrate with an LLM model that is trained on our customer or our product data. So you always start with the problems first. Never start with the idea, because the risk is you might build it, it might look very cool and shiny, but then nobody uses it. So I'll just go back to this slide. It's always about think of the user's pain and then think of the solution, not the other way around. I hope that answers. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Sumit, really nice slides. I was just kind of wondering, in product management and as a senior analyst,
Mhm.
we've used different these some of the many of these techniques, but the question is, when is there a specific schedule when we need to use these? Because I've used these in like varying degrees at different points of times, which might not necessarily be following a specific stepwise schedule as it is,
Correct.
like you have a iteration. I mean, waterfall is extreme. It's very stepwise oriented,
Mhm.
but I mean, just following these things. When do you use them? Do you have like um any know-how when you can use them?
Yeah, so to your first point that you mentioned, it's not a linear process. So, like, especially for 0 to 1 products, you're going to have multiple phases or iterations within MVP. You need to realign your products again and again. You'll have multiple phases, right? So the answer is that there's not going to be a sequential. It's not going to be, okay, first I'm going to use a CVP, I'm going to then build a plan, I'm then going to build a prioritization framework, and this, right? It's going to be as and when you're unlocking these different stages. So for example, when you're building a 0 to 1 product, when you're seeing that eventually products are being used more, you have achieved product market fit, then it makes sense, and then the natural need will come to have a team in place or a product development process and a cadence in place that can build on those feature requests and improve the product more and more. So it's more of what are the triggers that you are seeing. So based on your team, if you're seeing that in your team that they're already self-aligned, they are already aligned to your vision, they already know what needs to be built, you probably don't need a prioritization framework as such. You need a prioritization process or a prioritization cycle where you just go through the team and tell them that these are the priorities that we need to work on, and then you can assign it to them. The frameworks come into the place, and the idea behind frameworks is you make sure it's a checklist of things that you make taking care of when you're actually informing your product backlog or a prioritization anything. You're not missing out any certain things. So that's why when you talked about MVP, I talked about testing your hypothesis and your riskiest assumption. Because if you're just testing your hypothesis, then we will build a competitor to YouTube because we know people want to watch videos on their mobile. But the assumption was that actually users are going to upload the video, which we didn't test in our MVP. And then we see that nobody's using it, right? So that is why when you're thinking about frameworks, you ensure that whether you're actually doing all the things that a framework or a particular stage enters you to. You can use Kano, you can use n number of frameworks, rice model, whatever you want. But what is right for your team, what is right for your product is what matters more.
Because see, this is, I mean, the presentation, it seemed very aligned to a greenfield fresh project. But say you enter the project, in a brownfield project when they're
Mm-hmm.
already doing the iterations, this, that, you have not been involved in actually the evangelization or the creation of the product idea. Okay, you
Mm-hmm.
have not been there in the ideation phase, and suddenly you join, and then you have to pick up from the iterations and try to drag, take the product from there onwards.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how do you, obviously you can't use some of these techniques, but maybe you can use measure, learn, loop. Okay, but
Mm-hmm.
the other things you'll have to, if possible, use it as and when expediency demands.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah. So
because
I
I
mean,
like the session was very interesting. It's
Mhm.
just that, where do you separate theory from actual practice? Because knowing theory and theoretical stuff is extremely good, but when it comes to application in real world industry scenarios,
Mhm.
sometimes that's where, like, at least I've started asking questions like, when do we,
Yeah, yeah.
how do we adopt them in a brownfield project, not in a greenfield
Right,
one
right, right.
specifically?
Yeah. So to answer the first question, the reason it's sequential, appears sequential, is because the topic was basically scaling products from ideas to inception, which is why I took you through in terms of how do you start from an eventual idea. And when you're starting from idea, you need to obviously make sure that you're building the right thing, right? For greenfield projects, which is obviously out of the scope of this topic, but the idea is that it depends on your product development maturity also, right? Service based companies won't have some sort of, because there's already somebody giving them instructions, right? If you're working in a mid size or small product startup, you might have some product processes. Not if you're working in Silicon Valley group, these are the people who are writing your frameworks and which you see today, right? So it depends on the organization and the product maturity process that you have. The important thing I would say is that even in your organization, you might not see thing happening, and it's a culture thing. I understand that you can't just go that, hey, from tomorrow we are going to use rice model, but the point that is what is your current process like, and what is the thing that can be improved on, right? Frameworks is something, is just a guiding light which you can apply, because frameworks one on to one will never work. It has to always be from the lens of your product. So think of the processes, your product development process currently. Is it in the services category like Infosys, where there is no prioritization, it's all from the business? Or does it fall closer to the Silicon Valley, California style product management, where it's totally theory and cutting edge, which ideas which we can't even think today? So based on that spectrum, think of, okay, if this is there, I'm not saying you need to be Silicon Valley. It needs to be what is best for your team, your product, your business model. So what can be improved in your prioritization, in your day-to-day stand-ups, in your whatever processes. And one good point to get that feedback is to have your sprint review sessions, or rather your retrospectives. So retrospectives will tell you that, okay, from teams, what are the issues that they're facing, and your reviews will tell you what your product is facing, what the issues are. So first step, if I was in your place, I would try and ensure feedback loops are in place. So sprint retrospective is the easiest feedback loop to have, that will give you insight. The second is have to have, if it's in a very matured product, have some sort of surveys or follow-up emails of new features or increments that you're delivering, not daily, weekly, maybe monthly. That, okay, you've shipped this and this. What did you like? What did you didn't like? Right. So you have some sort of prioritization, some sort of input, some sort of feedback. Try and build those feedback loops and try and mature them. If you're falling more into towards the service kind where there's nothing, it's purely ad hoc, but obviously it can be better. That is, I think, so one thing which you and I need to recognize that there's a scope of improvement. It doesn't have to be this way, but it's not going to directly jump to some sort of MVP kind of proper SVPG type of product management. We need to think of what can be improved. The first step I would do, like I said, is have feedbacks look in place. Start with the are you having sprint retrospective? If not, start with that. That will be good reviews. Have reviews and sprint demos. If you don't have those demos, if your increments are too long, maybe have a weekly, monthly or 2 monthly demos or emails to get that feedback in. And earlier during the product, when you're actually building or designing solutions, have feedback loops with your designers and your business owners, that, okay, this is the prototype, this is the low fidelity prototype, are we having this, are we building this? So this is essentially a prioritization framework which you have in place, right? This is essentially validated learning, which is the entire theme of a 0 to 1 product. You can't dwell into one particular feature too long. If it is wrong, you need to have that loops in place. So I hope I answered properly. But yeah, my idea is, what I would like to say is that yes, I've been in a situation as well. It doesn't change overnight. It's a gradual process. Just think of starting small and seeing what can be improved in the current processes, and yeah, taking it incrementally.
Thanks, Sumit.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah, Sumit. Hi, this is Akhil.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, it was a great presentation. I really like the slides and the way you presented everything.
Thanks.
So I just have a small question. Like for you, we were talking about that no dog fooding stage and no beta testing stage.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So alpha testing and no those kind of stages. So you are talking about. So when we are, for example, when we are building an MVP, so and during somewhere around no closed beta and no about very close to public release and all you figured out no one of the main important features are the basic features which the customer needs is kind of missing, and in that cases how would we need to react and how kind of no go what would be the process we will be following in such kind of cases, because we are no close to the public release and we are expecting it to be released, and obviously all the all the formalities would have been all nearly closed by this particular time. And how would a project, as a project manager, we need to react in such kind of cases? I just
Mm-hmm.
want to know, because uh, I'm actually studying a lot of about project manager, and I'm looking forward to change my career towards the project management, and I don't have any no practical experience, so I just want to know get clarified about it.
Right. So I would actually go back to, again, this is the central thing, right? Do you have a build, measure, loop, learn loop in place? The reason I say is that when if it's taking too long for you to figure out that, in the alpha stage or beta stage, hey, actually users wanted this, we already are shipping all of this, but now we have shipped it, now the user is saying this, that means your loops are very small. That means you're building software, shipping it out, and then getting the feedback. The feedback needs to be really early, especially, I mean, keeping in theme with this presentation of this topic for today, scaling. When you're scaling from 0 to 1, your feedback loops needs to be probably in a daily or a twice once every 2 days, where you work with your designers, with your engineers, building some sort of prototypes and that into this. So ideally, first ask the question, irrespective of every stage you're in, MVP stage, alpha, or even actually product loops, what is your current feedback loop, your build, measure, learn loop? Can you shorten it? it can be not by actually delivering solutions like we saw. It can be just by testing hypothesis. If you're building a shoe delivery app, where people can order shoes, you don't have to build the app. You can just go within your locality and show them that these are the shoes, boutique shoes. Are you willing to pay it or not? So some sort of way or experiment where you can test that. So irrespective of the stage in it, what is the loop cycle? What is the time? Does it happen only after shipping products? Yes, users will change and they will be changing. That is the inherent nature of 0 to 1 products. That's going to be inherent roadmap change. But the idea is whether you are going to catch most of it as early as possible or not. So maybe have some sort of prototypes design before you try and before it slots into a sprint backlog. So as part of your product backlog, have those assumptions that okay, if you build this, XYZ is going to happen. If you build this, ABC is going to happen. And these ABCs are your assumptions. Try and design experiments around them and test it with your users, have interviews, send out surveys. So at least when you are adding it to the sprint backlog, at least you have some sort of learning or some sort of ideas in terms of, okay, whether you're confident in this working out or not.
And you were talking about the learning loop, right? Here. So actually, that answer actually makes completely sense. Having a good learning loops and all. So what I have a small doubt here is like, how can we optimize this learning loop according to us? Because different projects have different, because I did a project regarding real estate, where I was having basically I did a lot of surveys, and not only that, no, I did a lot of interaction, I mean, like face-to-face meetings and all. But when it comes to different kind of like, for example, no app or anything, or else different kind of product, it will completely change. For example, if you are going to a food product or something like that, you getting a direct feedback. For example, you have a shipped, for example, a papad, or I don't know, or some kind of a food product, and you getting the feedback directly from the customer is really a difficult thing. I mean, you get my point, right? For example, you have an ice cream, and it is already in the supermarket, and directly no, the only either thing is like, you either the sales are not up to the mark. For example, the sales are, you don't know what exactly is going wrong with the thing.
Right.
So in such kind of things, like, how do we optimize, and can we, like, how do we learn what kind of feedback loops we can create?
Right. So what you're talking about in this measure is basically the qualitative part of it. Users are telling you, right, they're not this is not working out, or they
I
don't
mean,
want to
like,
do this.
for example, it's as I said in the example,
Mhm.
uh, the product is not selling that much, so
Right.
we can understand that there's something wrong with the product. Like, obviously,
So
that's why it's
mhm.
not selling.
Yeah. So
So
what you're talking about, So there's this concept of leading and lagging metrics. So it's obvious, right? Like, let's say you're not liking a product, let's say you're paying for it today, you start using it less and less, you start losing it less and less, and eventually you don't pay for it. Now if you are only tracking that okay, how much payment is coming in, then obviously you will see that as a lagging metric which comes later, that okay, people are not engaging in it. So the measures phase talks about not only lagging, it actually talks about leading metric. I'll give you one example which I had in my real life. So basically we were building a checkout page, right? We already had this page. You could use certain payment ways to checkout. What we have wanted to introduce was one click checkout, because the checkout phase was too long. It was, most of the time, the second most section time was in the checkout page. So we wanted one checkout. So we thought, we had the hypothesis that okay, at least 20% of the users will use this when we release it in so and so stage. What happened was that not only 10, 20, 20%, it was barely 2%, 3%, right? So now this is sort of a leading metric that tells you that the click-through rate of that is low. I don't need to go to interview to users to understand that this is not happening. After interviewing the users, what we figured out was that people were not trusting that particular solution. That okay, if I do one click through, one click checkout, will it like debit all my money? Is there going to be some sort of fraud taking place? So eventually, we introduce some sort of safety seals or verified logos, which then improve the click through rate. Right. So that you need to have in the measure group, it talks about not only revenue or like you said, not people are not engaging. You need to have those kind of leading metrics. So to your example, you gave an example of real estate where users are not checking out or buying that product, right? So when you say revenue or people are not doing, what are the different decisions that come before that? What are the way you can quantify that? When you say, okay, your revenues are low, how many people are checking out? Is that low? Is that also reducing? If your proper process is everything fine, there's enough users coming and your normal funnels is fine, but in the checkout page users are dropping out, then there's probably some UI problems or some frustrations happening in the checkout page. If the checkout page is fine, maybe in the search page something is happening, right? So you always have a line of sort of a feedback loop or a like Ishikawa or a mind map kind of thing, that you already have a result, but there are different trigger points before that. So can you measure those things? So in an MVP stage, when you're doing it, you can't wait for shipping out a feature and doing this. What you can do is you can have some sort of buttons, you can have some sort of flows, and seeing quantity of users engaging with that or not. So that is giving sort of leading metric. Another example in our day-to-day life, our weight, right? Everybody wants to be fit, everybody wants to be healthy, but your actual weight, your kilograms, that is a lagging metric. It depends on how much you're eating, you're consuming. So your leading metric would be what is your daily calorie consumption. Are you affecting that? Are you reducing that? Because if you're not doing that, it'll be too late. Before that, your weight will be as a lagging metric will be too high. So what you're doing as a product to do an analytics, you're trying to ensure that okay, your daily calories or what you're affecting your lagging metric, your leading metrics, whether you're affecting those or not. So that's one way to look at it. Look at your solution is try to figure out what is the chain of events leading to that failure or the reason why users are not signing up, or like you said, revenue is dropping, and then trying quantifying and seeing what are the things which are problematic in those steps.
Yeah, actually that makes sense, Sumit. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. Any questions? No? Okay.
Hi, Sumit, Ashwini over here. Just one quick question before I go. Does the strategy for B2B or B2C differs when we look at the product release? Because when we are B2B, we have the time to get a feedback, and it's very limited to coming from one or few people. But if it is B2C, it's a kind of does it impact the product overall, and then uh, it's it's hard to regain the lost reputation. Is it something on those lines?
No, in B2C also you can actually run those experiments. So today, if you have a good technology or product analytics tech where you can run those experiments, you can actually turn on and off different features for different features. Like, to give, I think so. I mean, this is an Indian example. Sorry if it doesn't resonate, but I think so. What is the name of the company? The one which offers cleaning services and all. So basically, I think so. Yeah, I forgot the name. So what they had was a recent way where instead of just having a saloon at home, somebody coming and cleaning your house, they also have a 15-minute person delivery where people will come for an hour, help you with your daily work and go. But now that feature is not available to the entire place. Like I live in Pune, it's only part in certain pin codes. So if you have a good product analytics stack, you can build a feature, you can give it variables that, okay, these are the variables in which you want to run this experiment on. So run the name of the experiment would be, this 15-minute quick help feature. And one of the variables would be the pin codes it's available on. One of the pin codes would be, let's say, the demographics. If it's a B2C app, what is the age group? If you know that this is more, if a feature going to be used by families, and you have that profile within your organization, within your app, since you have a field for is married or not, and that's true, you can have set that as a variable. So using that experiments, if you know that, okay, this is going to work in, and there are lots of places that this has happened, right? Let's say if you start with Bangalore or Mumbai or one of the tier 1 cities in your region, if your market, roll it out as a feature flag to certain pin codes to markets. Since it's B2C, so I'm assuming most of the your demographics would be geographically distributed. So you can still have it like different demographic wise. You can run experiments and then you can iterate. So if it's not working on a particular set of pin codes, which is which you think is the most likeliest to do it, then probably it won't work for others. So you won't get that reputation damage by just doing a full-fledged public release to all of the users. That's why you have these different stages. And for B2B case, it's more easier because you don't have that virality, or you don't have the, you generally, what you do is you have a outreach program where you have a set of alpha users or alpha customers who throughout your product cycle will always come into a beta life cycle. So even you can do it in Microsoft, right? If you're a alpha ring member or beta ring member, you always get access to the beta features, then you can provide feedback on that. So that's more of a voluntary thing. In B2C, you can't actually, I mean, you can still have opt-in if you want, but then your engagement with the feature would be low. But what you can do is you can still control the experiment. You can just run an experiment on 1%, 2%, and you have a good analytics text. Launch darkly is one example. It allows you to do that.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Sumit. It was wonderful. Thank you. Wonderful session. Thanks a lot.
Sure.
All right. Thank you very much, Sumit, for this wonderful session so far. And I believe people have got their answers where they were, had some questions. So, yeah, thank you everyone to join and make this webinar is a successful one. So once again, this is Rupak from Techcanvass. So we are starting our product management batch. Next batch is from 15th of November. And I have shared the link of our course page. So anyone who wish to start their career in product management, you can join the courses from this link directly. And if you have any questions, you can definitely reach me. I have shared my number over the chat box as well. So numbers is both available on WhatsApp and normal call as well. All right. So thank you, Sumit, once again. And thank you very much, everyone, for joining this webinar today. Hope to see you in the batch and have a wonderful time ahead. Thank you.
Thank you.